All right, hello and welcome to our last webinar in our winter webinar series for the Telelink group chats. We'll wait for a couple of people to jump on in, and then we'll do a bit of a breakdown of what you can anticipate on this webinar series. We'll do a bit of an intro of our guest who's standing by, ready to answer your questions, which we are super excited to have along with us today. While I'm waiting for some people to come through, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the many lands on which we meet today, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. This webinar is designed to be quite interactive, so we'd love to get your questions in. If you are using a screen reader, chat function for Zoom is enabled. You can do that by using keystroke Alt H to bring up the chat window, then type your question in. So definitely get all of those questions in for our guest. Obviously, I'll do a bit of an intro for our guest who's been waiting quite patiently. We might wait a couple more minutes just for a couple more people to drop through. For those who are joining us from Melbourne, we have our guest who is also joining us from Melbourne. So one of our own. We're gonna call him one of our own. So our guest at this time is a renowned specialist gaming developer who co-founded Split Atom Labs in 2023 with industry veterans from Meta to focus on building a more inclusive future for casual gaming. His gaming studio was born from the belief that gaming has the power to build connections and support mental wellness. The first step on this journey, Land of Livia, a story-driven adventure game designed for underserved audiences, especially people living with disabilities. It is a finalist of the Apple Design Award for 2025 and has been described by key role models in the blindness community, such as Molly Burke, as an inclusive masterpiece. Joining us from Melbourne, as I said earlier today, Mr. Aaron Vernon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for the invite. Happy to be here.
Look, I'm gonna want to get right into that game and tell everyone about it because I've been playing it. It's a very cool game. But let's kind of kick off with a bit of a background in game development because it's often one
Yeah.
of those things that it it's much like your games. It's a bit of a side quest, and then
Yep.
what made you study in this space?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been really attached to gaming from a super young age with the original Nintendo Entertainment System. I have a model of Lego of one of them in the background of me at the moment. And this was really like from a young age, the way that I coped with a lot of life. Like I gamed, I escaped and got relaxation from the many different games that I played. And so, even from as young as 10 or 11, I wanted to start creating games. So I was like drawing them out, like this is what they would look like, this is how they would work, designing board games for friends and family. And then I started to teach myself programming around 12 from university C++ textbooks, actually. I was reading them. I got my parents to go buy them. I was reading them and I would just start making games. And so from that point on, I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. And I think I had like many career steps along the way. And I'm doing games at different points in time, but in different capacities. So yeah, it's kind of really been a lifelong journey.
So, bearing in mind the gaming industry has changed
Oh
quite
yes.
dramatically. When you were a bit younger, looking to get into programming and looking to what was there as much sort of gaming storyline sort of up like role-playing games at that particular point in time, or was it kind of
Yeah.
your Super
Yeah.
Mario?
I mean, yes, it certainly started, pretty arcade, pretty small style games. I think that there were a few games earlier on, like Baldur's Gate 2 and Planescape Torment. These were games that were based on role-playing games.
Yeah.
And this would then go on and become games like World of Warcraft, and many of the modern games since then. So they were definitely around, and I was definitely inspired by them. And I think it's really was the matter of like people had these great stories to tell, but they were waiting for technology to kind of catch up to
Yeah.
allow them to tell the full extent of them.
Yeah, definitely. And I am a bit of a gamer as well, and I remember going and buying my first copy of Baldur's Gate and finding it was
Hmm.
discs long.
Yep. Big game.
So it was really the technology took a while to catch up to a lot of this sort of
Yep.
in-depth gaming. Um, did when you studied in this space, did it kind of feel a little bit like they were kind of making the course up as it went, or was it really had they already got it all figured it out?
So I didn't study game development specifically. I went broader to do software engineering because I wanted to make sure I had enough expertise to do proper engineering in the game space rather than it kind of being a little bit of art, a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of all these different elements. I'm like, I can teach myself that stuff pretty straightforward in a pretty straightforward manner. The engineering is the hard stuff. Let me really focus on how I can be the best game engineer that I could be. So that's what I spent 4 years at University of Melbourne studying software engineering, which even at that time, like software engineering was not what it is today. It's
Yeah.
not the kind of cool, trendy thing that everyone wanted to do. It was a little bit more niche than that. But then I left that and then went straight after I finished, went straight into the game industry. Well, actually, I had an internship in the last year of my university where I worked at a local game studio.
Right. Okay. So have you kind of kept up to date with the studying around gaming in that field? Have you kind of got a bit of a scope of what it is today for
Yeah.
somebody to go and
So
study the same thing that you've kind
Yeah,
of
I
got
mean,
years
my
of
advice is
experience
the
doing?
same actually. I still encourage people if they want to get into the development side of games, I still think software engineering is one of the best things that you can study.
Yeah.
I think that if you've got like art or narrative or production or different elements that you want to look into, then a games college is probably going to be one of the better options. They were really just starting to become a thing when I was
Yeah.
younger, and now they're much more, and there's some great ones in Australia that you can go and check out. But for development specifically, I would still say that like a traditional computer science software engineering background is still one of the best ways to get ahead.
Yeah. So look, bearing in mind too, I'm going to use a rather sort of primitive example here. Uh, I, growing up, was a chef's apprentice, and that often meant counting, you know, countless hours of cutting carrots. What would you say it had to do a lot of whilst learning this trade in particular?
Yeah, good question. I would say t testing.
Yeah.
I think with any development, product testing is a big part of it, but uh, in many traditional software areas, you can kind of outsource that to other people to the team to like do a very functional analysis of like, is it working? Is it not working? Here are the issues. But I think with game development, it's so much about feel that you want to be doing that yourself. You want to be, does this mechanic come across the way that I intended it to? Does this narrative beat hit? Does that audio give the right feedback that I'm looking for? Does that haptic? And so you do spend a lot of time sitting there playing your own game and exploring it, seeing where it breaks, seeing where it lands, seeing what needs to be improved. That's, a very large amount of time is spent doing that. Sadly, to the end goal of that the game is no longer fun for yourself to play, which is a little bit of the unfortunate side effect of being a game developer is you never enjoy the game that you're working on. I guess you can't have it all.
Yeah, look, you pointed it out too. I've been playing Land of Livia as research, and I'm still enjoying it. But you're quite right. Often when you've ticked something off your tick sheet. This game is done. Y- I think in general, us humans tend to think, oh, okay, well, what's next?
Yep.
Rather than enjoying the plaudits. From an individual standpoint, uh, let's talk a little bit about how you identified a bit of a gap in the market regarding
Yeah.
inclusive gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started building the game back in 2014. I was just finishing up with a startup in New York City, which is where I was living at the time, and kind of feeling a little bit down, honestly. Like the job didn't end that great, and I'm like, what comes next? I don't know, but I'm going to spend a few weeks making a game. And I wanted to make a game that I wanted to exist in the world. And so I went and did that, a game that kind of drew on all the inspirations that I had earlier in my life. But it wasn't actually until quite a few years later in 2018 that I started to getting feedback from the AppleVis online community saying that, hey, your game is pretty accessible. Here are some tips on how to make it more accessible. And so I would read that feedback and I would explore the space and start to implement more accessibility. And then I noticed that how happy these folks were to be able to play a game and to have a developer that was listening to their feedback and responding. And this, I found this quite curious and interesting. And so I wanted to learn more. And the more I dug into it, the more I was kind of addicted to learning more about it and doing more about it. And then over the ensuing years from 2018, to 2023, when I founded Split Atom Labs, I was really, researching and learning a lot more about the gaps in inclusive gaming, where games are today, what are the opportunities are, where are people being left behind. And then then that's when I really sat down to look at the numbers, and I realized, holy moly, there is a lot of people here that are not able to game that I think could get value from gaming. And then that's kind of what was the impetus for starting the company.
Right. So the game that you were talking about that you're wanting to have out in the world, obviously, Land of Livia. Uh,
Yep.
was it how you conceptualized it, or has it kind of changed with that feedback that you got?
I think most of it was a very rapid process early on. I think I built the first beta in 2 weeks, and then I got feedback from friends and family. That's probably the most the game was shaped in its history. It was like very early on. It's like, here's what people are liking, here's where they think there's room to change it. And then really all that's happened over the many years is refinement, depth of the game, and then obviously the breadth of the accessibility features that we include and the support, to just really broaden the number of people that can enjoy this core experience that I built. I'm always trying to look at, like, how do I make it more streamlined? How do I make it more accessible even just in the general sense of just pick up and play for any person. And that's kind of where most of the evolution has gone, but the core concept actually hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, yeah. And which one came first, the idea of the game or Split Atom Labs? An
The idea
inclusive
for the
game
game,
studio.
definitely.
The idea for the game, okay.
Yeah, so I was just building it, and the fact that I can, I'm on the path to having a sustainable company around this is kind of a blessing and something that I'm very thrilled to have happened.
And look, as it's a bit of a tip the hat moment though, because you've obviously identified a gap as well, and Split Atoms Labs is designed to be an inclusive gaming studio. I would say
Yes,
based in large by some of the feedback that you're getting through and some of the people you've come in contact with since starting the game. Does that sound
absolutely,
about right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely like the where we can excel over other companies, especially over bigger companies, is that we can engage directly with the people in our target audience, and we can listen to them and learn from them, and factor that into our development process in a very rapid and iterative way.
Yeah. Awesome. So, for those who haven't played the game, tell us, give us a bit of an elevator pitch. What is Land of Livia?
Yeah, so Land of Livia it's a story-driven adventure game that's designed to be played throughout your day. So rather than being an active game where you need to have it open for long sessions and it kind of maybe it distracts you and you're late for work, instead it's the kind of game where you can check back in every couple of hours to progress the narrative, get rewards, and get a little bit of escape and relaxation throughout your day. So you start as a lonely farmhand with an overbearing boss in this fantasy world of Livia, and you set out into the world to uncover a kind of dark conspiracy of evil antagonists that are disrupting the land, and get stronger, progress through the narrative, and play over the course of quite a few months is usually how long people play it for.
Yeah, and it's I think one of those things where you kind of really honed in on the market of people that are playing it. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of turning the concept into the game it is today? Was there um it's often hard because you're doing the developmental side of things as well, but then you're also doing the narrative side of things.
Yep.
So it's not just asking about how you program and develop this game, it's about how you came up with the idea for the story as well, because a lot of our
Yeah.
blind and low vision audience, they're very story driven with our library,
hmm
our Vision Australia library audiobooks getting a lot of use. How did you have the assistance of a writer or did you write a lot of this concept yourself?
I've wrote the whole game myself. And now I have some people helping, some team members that are kind of helping out, including actually one of our players who was blind, who's reached out to me and said, "Hey, how can I contribute to this?" And so I'm kind of working with him on ways to contribute narrative. But to answer your question, I guess I'll break it apart. It is quite separate, the product development perspective from the narrative development. From a product development perspective, I always had a really clear idea in my mind of the kind of person that would play this game. And obviously modeled on myself, but with the belief that there are more people like me out there. And so I was a busy professional that, would tend to get overwhelmed easily, either, from too much going on in life, or maybe even from a very intense video game taking up too much of my time. So I wanted something that I could play and get all the enjoyment that I had from a game like World of Warcraft is a great example, but I could play throughout my day and it wouldn't take over my life. What I didn't know at that point in time, and I only found out, I think, just over a year ago now, is that I'm neurodivergent. I have autism and ADHD. And so, by what I'd actually done is I'd inadvertently made an accessible game. I'd made a game that was more easily enjoyed by someone who was neurodivergent. And then, when the product feedback came from AppleVis, I expanded that accessibility to be blind players as well. And then more recently, we expanded to support low vision. And so it's really always having a crystal idea of who are we building this for and how can we make their specific experience more enjoyable, and then obviously getting that feedback from them. So that's the way that we go about product development, is having that crisp idea of who we're building it for and then principles around how to make the best experience for them. From a narrative development perspective, man, I mean, narrative is hard. It takes a I'm sure some of your listeners, if they've tried doing anything like this themselves, is it takes a lot of sheer willpower and energy to create something that didn't exist before. It has to kind of exist in your brain, bubble around, and then you have to figure out a way to express it in whatever medium. And for me, obviously, it was this text format. And it kind of had to be done over many, many months and years, because it did take so much energy. A lot of the narrative I was writing at night after my children or child at that point in time was in bed. I'd say, okay, every night I'm going to do an hour and a half, 2 hours, sit down and write, and have set myself goals and benchmarks and just kind of keep going at it. And that's really how I got through it. Nowadays, actually, it is a bit easier because you can use AI to help with a lot of the creative process when you get stuck. It's amazing for overcoming writer's block. Um, and then as far as like, I get asked a lot, where does you've created this whole world, where did it come from? And I've done a fair amount of reading on kind of the topic of like how does narrative and creative content kind of come into existence. And humans have this great ability to take in a lot of context and art and creative stuff from a lot of different sources, and then mix it around in our brain and add twists to it and feed back on itself in interesting ways based on your own personal experiences. So, in order to write better narrative, like, watch a lot of movies, read a lot of books, have a lot of interesting conversations with people. I think that's where kind of you can get into a position where you can create something that's a little bit, it draws from all that, but is a little bit different.
Yeah, and look, you sort of touched on it as well. Sometimes with the process of trying to make something, well, in the process of making something inclusive, it betters everyone's enjoyment level across the board. So,
Yes.
is it a bit of a juggling act though when you are obviously trying to make it inclusive for everyone? It can be a bit of a juggling act if you sort of focus on one particular element and it might take away from the other. Did that sort of kind of go through your thought process at the time as you were sort of playing around with it?
Um, Yes, but also I think that that's a struggle of any product development, any
True.
creative endeavor, is
Yeah.
that, the more broad you make it, there's the chance that you're going to isolate specific groups, or the more niche you're going to make it, you're going to limit your appeal. So I think that most companies face that same challenge. I think that the angle that we have is slightly, more focused on inclusivity, which then actually just makes it more worthwhile of a problem to
True.
solve,
True.
because it's having a real impact if you're able to get that balance right. And so, we have principles that we take into the design process very early on that prevent us getting too far down a direction that is just not going to be viable.
Yeah.
And once again, I think that's built on the fact that we've had so many conversations from our player base over the years that we have that intuition. Plus, we have beta testers that we work with that give us very early feedback. And so we don't find it as hard as I think people would expect
Yeah.
to get that balance right. Like it doesn't slow us down. We're able to do it and find the path. I think that what we're most interested though is like how can we be even more innovative? How can we take it to the next level of like not just using the technology that people expect to be in use today, but like the technology that's coming out in the next few years and beyond to make even more interactive and even more engaging games.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. So I've got a question here from Kathy. Is the game played on a PC or do you use a smartphone?
Yes, great question. Sorry, I should have said that in the intro. So it is a mobile game. It's iOS only at the moment. So actually, sorry, it's iPhone. It can be played on Mac. It can be played on iPad. But it's the Apple ecosystem at the moment, and that's because we've built it natively to make the most of the accessibility features that the platform provides. We do get a lot of feedback that people want to play it on Android, so that's something that we're really keen to figure out how to make happen. But because it is native, it's going to be a little bit of a bigger lift than what happens with other games. And then PC, like as in Windows desktop, it's once again, it's something that we'd really love to do. We've got to figure out the right way to do it. But at the moment, yeah, mobile, iPad, and Mac.
Great question, Kathy. You keep them coming. So in regards to the game, and you've talked about, how much goes into creation of something like that, or something like a role-playing game in general.
Hmm.
Did you feel like it was a bit of a learning process as you went because it was your first game, or was this something that you felt like it was you knew beginning and end?
Yeah, I that's a really good question. I think that I was very lucky in that various different jobs that I'd had before 2014. I worked on games, both big and small. And so I knew what went into game development, and I knew specifically how hard it gets on at the pointy end of actually getting a game that is complete, that is bug-free and able to be launched, and is able to resonate with players. Like a lot of the work of a game comes a lot later than many people would think, right? Like actually making the first version of the game is relatively quick. All the hard stuff comes later. And so, with that in mind, deliberately designed a game that was very well contained in scope so that I would actually be able to launch it. And so, that's what I did. And I think that went well for me. I think the hard part then was that it was kind of successful and starting to resonate with people. And then so I had to play a lot of catch up over many years to get the rest of the kind of the game built out. And honestly, that's something that we're still doing today. Now, like earlier this year, we relaunched the game with a bunch of new stuff, and then towards the end of the year, we're looking to add kind of even more interactivity to the game. So yeah, it's been a process.
And do you feel like there's anything that you would have changed in that process, or is it really were you happy with how it overall went?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question to be asked that, right? Because it could be difficult to split apart like what are the things that were necessary to get us to where we are today, and the slightest change could have meant that we were on a different trajectory. But I think the biggest challenge that I had was that in 2018, when we made it accessible for the blind players on Apple Viz, we had a huge surge of players and a huge surge of popularity. And I wasn't in a position to really capitalize on that. I hadn't started a company. I had a full-time job. I had a newborn baby. And so it took me like, I knew I eventually wanted to start a company around it, but I just didn't know like what was that path. And so when we started the company up in 2023, we've had to do a lot of work to get a lot of those users back again. And so between 2018 and 2023, I'd released more content, I'd made improvements, but at each time, like it was harder to retain or get back those users. And so now, like with the momentum of starting a company, with social media, with different ways of having community, it's so difficult to build. And if I had figured out a way to like continue building it from that point in 2018 to now, I think we'd be in an even stronger position, rather than feeling like, we had to start again when we started the company. So that was really the thing of like, I probably should have capitalized on it more in 2018 rather than waiting to 2023. But on the flip side, like, I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to do the company at that point in time.
Sounds like you might have been just a teensy weensy little bit busy, mate.
I
Quite a
was,
few
yeah,
life changes in there.
yeah,
Um,
and I was just working for a small multinational corporation, so I didn't have much else going on.
so can I ask a question in regards to the blind and low vision
Yep,
gamers that are on this platform that love this platform? What are the things that they've pointed out are the best parts enjoyment wise for them?
yep. So I think what our game does that other accessible games do not is that we don't market it as just an accessible game. It's not something that we went out to make that can only be enjoyed by one set of people. It is a mainstream game that happens to have some of the best mobile accessibility for a game in the world. And that's something that's felt from the way that we talk about our game, the way that our you can find our game, and but also the game community itself. When players join the game, they're placed into a random campfire, which is a small collection of players that we put together to have community and conversation in the game. And it's actually, we have a lot of sighted players that this is their first exposure to even talking to or learning more about what a person who is blind experience in life is. And so that kind of community element that we've been able to build, and the fact that people can feel like they play the same game as everybody else, and that they're not losing anything as part of that experience. And that's something as a principle we hold very, very strongly. That is, I think, what people have enjoyed the most. And then secondly, the fact that it's a deep game. It's something that is it's not a surface level game. It's not something you just play for a few minutes with like very light mechanics. This is a gamer's game. And there's a lot of enjoyment and depth to be had there, a lot of immersion, and I think that surprises players. And it's something that they kind of haven't seen in many other places.
Yeah, spot on, spot on. And look, I've used the campfire function as well. It's very it does create a bit of a community, a non-invasive community as well. I think it needs
Yes,
to be pointed out, because it doesn't feel like it's forced fun. It feels like it's
yes,
very, very laid back and relaxed. Once again, a lot like the game mechanics as well. Um, would you agree in me saying that you identifying yourself as being, you know, a, in a bit of a gap regarding games that you wanted to play as well? It might have also had
yep,
a bit of a dual effect with you creating something that also
absolutely.
appeals to other people that can fill in those
I
gaps.
love the social elements of like World of Warcraft and the raiding and everything, but like I have, a lot of social anxiety. And so that was hard for me to get into and hard for me to be a part of. And then there was pressure that came as a result of that sometimes as well. And then I would have challenges like, how do I tell them this is too much? Like I can't do it anymore. And so I set out to like, okay, what is that core feeling that I want there? It's this connection with other people. It's this shared experience. What is the lowest friction way that I can provide that in the least anxiety inducing way? And that's what I built. And then as a result, it's like has this wider application that has resonated with more people and something that we're very proud of.
So we're hitting the halfway mark. So once again, I'd just like to remind people that this is designed to be an interactive webinar. So we'd love to get your questions and direct them towards Aaron. If you are using a screen reader, just a reminder that you can use keystroke Alt H to bring up the chat window, and then you can type your question in. Once I receive that, I will direct it towards Aaron. Um, and I'm sure, well, based on what I'm seeing here, he'd be very, very happy to answer it. So, um, can I just carry on here? So, there's obviously been, the first Apple phone had many, many updates before it was what was deemed to be the inclusive thing that it is today, or at least the inclusive features that it has today. You've obviously done updates around that, honing that as well, I'm guessing, over time.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So the first, oh, you go, sorry.
Um, do you reckon that kind of means the design award from Apple kind of means a little bit more? Would you agree with that? The fact that they've been on such a journey
Sorry, I missed
themselves.
the first. You cut out for us.
Oh,
Sorry, I think
sorry.
my connection's not great. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I think
Sure,
I missed
sure.
part of it.
So I was saying that, Apple devices have been on a bit of a journey regarding building uh, those inclusion keys to assist people
Hmm.
with blindness and low vision. The fact that they've gone on that journey and the fact that you've made updates over time to make it more inclusive, does that Apple Design Award maybe mean a little bit more than what uh, just
Oh,
a piece of paper?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is a company that knows what they're doing. It's a company that holds their values very close to them, and builds with those in mind. And so, to get the recognition from them is incredibly meaningful. But I think it's also meaningful just from the inclusive gaming community in general. The fact that we could get a kind of recognition at this level for a game. Um, is just a really great signal to send to the gaming industry in general.
Yeah, look, I'd be very, very, very happy with that if I was you. I imagine you probably are. But I guess from your gaming studio's perspective, you're now an inclusion specific gaming studio.
Yep.
Um, do you is it difficult to find that culture in the workforce that you employ, or is it something that you found people really want? They really want to create inclusive games.
I think that, I mean, we're still very small, so we haven't kind of had to go to the step of like really trying to scale our team just yet. But the people that we find, I mean, we love hiring inclusively. I feel that inclusive teams make inclusive content. That is really kind of one of my key principles. And so, um, we have our music track that was developed by a blind player of the game. I mentioned a narrative designer that we're working with as well, who's also blind. We had a community manager with a physical disability. Our designer is neurodivergent. I'm neurodivergent, and so um, I think if you find people that can have a personal connection to the why of why we're doing this, I think that's really special, and that's not been a challenge for us to find thus far. So hopefully, that continues. I think that the flip side of it, though, in terms of the challenges we face by doing something here that is pretty different to what most other companies and most other game developers, having people that are willing to push through those barriers with us, that's also key.
So from bearing in mind as well that you've been a gamer since you were sticking game cartridges in a hardware over software sort of gamer,
Yes.
is the technology somewhat prohibitive for inclusive game design at this particular point in time? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I say in that kind of cheeky tone is because no, not at all. We have all of the technology today to make the vast majority of games inclusive. And that's where I kind of sit back and look at the state of the industry and look at how little some of these companies are doing. Even stuff that could be quite low-hanging fruit to expand your audience, and they're not either interested or aware. And so this is a kind of broader part of our mission is to bring awareness of like, hey, this is the impact you can have by doing this. It expands your market. It makes a better game for everybody. There's enough non-gaming evidence that inclusive design is going to be better design overall, for your audience. But for whatever reason, games have been kind of left behind. I feel like they're lagging further behind than many other areas of inclusive design. Um, so yeah, I don't think there's a technology problem. I think that there is a awareness and commitment problem from the various different developers, which I'm slagging on them a little bit there, but I think that the other side of it is like the games industry itself is not in a great place. There's been, mass layoffs. There's a real kind of struggling to figure out like how do games evolve, as audiences evolve over time. So it's not an easy thing to prioritize given, in that challenging position. But I still think it's worth pushing for.
So obviously, you would be, I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In regards to new gamers that are coming from you know, what you would classify as the people in the gaps who may
Mhm.
not have had an interest in gaming, what is it? Would you recommend your game as their first game, and why?
Yeah. I mean, definitely. From the fact of like how committed we are to making that a seamless experience. And then also, if it's not a seamless experience, like give us that feedback and we'll take it on board and improve it even more. So I think it's a very low stakes, easy way for people who don't consider themselves gamers to give it a go. And I think that's why we're mobile first, because mobile accessibility technology is phenomenal. And we know that the vast majority of people already have mobile phones that they use for these purposes. And so gaming is just like, hey, just tap on a different app in the morning and just give it a go, and see how you go. Um, yes, definitely think it's a good first step, and we've had many people that have been in that exact situation and giving us positive feedback that like, hey, this is the first time I've tried this, and it really was, it was great, it was different, etc. Um, it's interesting as well, just a quick tangent in that not something that happens in mainstream games, in the mainstream gaming population as well, in that people don't want to be associated with the gamer culture. So there are a lot of gamers out there that would never call themselves a gamer, but you can definitely bet that there are gaming companies that are building games for them. This is, mum and dads with the Candy Crush in their pocket, or someone who's waiting for a train to arrive and playing a little game. And so that's another angle that I think about a lot, because the game, and that I think that's also part of why the games industry is in an interesting place right now, because the core gamers that kind of grew it to the place that it is now, they actually don't represent where the vast majority of revenue and growth is coming from. And it's not this kind of hardcore gaming culture that people often associate with games.
And look, you sort of touched on as well, every platform needs funds coming in to kind of assist it in the creation. Obviously, it, money makes the world go round a little bit, and that just is what it is.
Yes.
What I particularly like about Land of Livia is that it's not intrusive in please buy, please spend your own money on this. Did you, when you were designing
Yeah.
the game, was that something that you prioritized, that it wasn't intrusive, please buy?
Yeah, so I that was the other part of the my answer from earlier of like why I created it. Like I definitely wanted the feeling from these other games. But at the time, and still is the case now, is mobile games are typically incredibly predatory with their monetization. It's very over the top. It in a lot of cases it preys on the lack of executive functioning that people with ADHD suffer from. And so it's just really not friendly for a lot of different types of people. And so I definitely didn't want to kind of follow the norm there and go for that predatory monetization. I I will say though that I think that there's more improvement we need to do on our own monetization, and finding that right balance between where we are today and then making more money from it, but then not being predatory. We haven't quite figured out that thing, but I think as with everything we do, it's like starting with those principles of like we want to have ethical, transparent, non-overwhelming monetization, and then kind of go from there.
So, this might not be a question that you can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If I was blind or low vision playing your game and wanted to go into gaming development, what would you anticipate would be the hurdles regarding using the tech to do that?
Yeah. It's so I'm actually the narrative designer that I'm working with, he's an aspiring game developer. So on the side, I'm also mentoring him on how to like get started there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's been pretty wild to watch the fact that today is probably there's never been an easier time to do it. In that you can use AI to get you some early concepts and play around with it. It's a term that's known as vibe coding these days, where people with not a lot of training or skill in the area sit with AI and just start to create and start to refine ideas. So he's been able to build a blackjack game by doing that, like a functional blackjack game. So I think the hardest part that I've had to troubleshoot with him is the accessibility of the tools themselves. And so it might be the case that you really want to build on a specific platform, like maybe you really want a Windows Steam game or whatever it might be, but that tool chain may not be accessible in itself. So it's about finding the right tools to start with, and also talking to another contact that I have who's blind and a developer is actually the documentation itself is often not accessible, which is like another barrier. But once again, AI can help you get around that because it can kind of distill it and deliver it in a different way. So, tips are start simple, find a tool that's accessible, and just start building, and heavily leverage AI. They're kind of my big tips.
Yeah, good call, good call. And it is a question that we get asked a lot. We've got, you know, quite a few, we've got a couple of different gaming groups within the Telelink program. And it's often one of the questions is, if I wanted to have, if I had an interest in this, would I be able to create rather than just enjoy?
Hmm.
As a mentor for this gentleman, lady, let's just say either
He's a man, yes.
man. Okay,
Yep,
so what's some of
yep,
the advice that you sort of would have liked to have heard when you were? I'm guessing he's a younger guy. Or would I be?
yep,
So what's some
yep.
of the advice a young Aaron would have liked to have heard back then?
Yeah. Um, I think just, stay true to yourself and keep building and just kind of trust that the natural ups and downs that come with life or with pursuing anything that's worth pursuing, they're temporary, they're transient. And so, the highs don't last forever and the lows don't last forever. So just continue, with the direction that you've chosen to go, and worry less about the moment to moment challenges that arise. And you know, remember to take a step back and reflect on the progress that you make. And that's certainly like with this individual stuff that I kind of will point out is like, look at where you are now versus where you were 3 months ago. Yes, it was very, very hard to get there, but that's significant progress. So, and I'm certainly guilty of that as well. Even now, like, we're coming off the back of this Apple Design Award finalist, and I'm still just on my own back constantly about like, yeah, but what are we doing next, and how can we move faster, and why haven't we done it yet, and why haven't we solved this problem? And so I'm still just constantly on that learning journey of going a little bit easier on myself.
So I'm going to play a bit of an advocate here and say, or a bit of devil's advocate, should I say? What are you doing next?
Yeah.
What are we working on at the moment? Here's the question. What have you got running around in your brain there, and what have you got actually in production at the moment?
Yep, yep. So I'll answer the second part of that question first, like what's immediately coming next. So there's three different things, priority areas that we're looking at. One is further quality of life improvements for the game itself, for the current players. We obviously had a huge spike in players after the Apple Design Award announcement and from our campaign with Molly Burke. And so, we 10x'd how many players that we have. And so they gave us a bunch of feedback and doing what we do, we want to listen to that feedback and respond as quickly as possible. And so we have a bunch of quality of life improvement stuff like, hey, we want to be able to send campfire messages more easily, or it'd be great to be able to have reactions to other people's campfire messages. Or like the gem cutting mini game is still not as accessible as it could be, and I'd love to kind of make it more accessible. So that's the quality of life stuff. We're also doing we're interested in some of the upcoming features from Apple, and how can we integrate that directly into our app to kind of stay with the latest trends on Apple with the liquid glass design, and with some of the widget technology that's coming out, and Apple Intelligence. So that's another stream of work that we have. And then the last stream is that we have this hypothesis that our game is still not as broadly uh, downloaded and kind of um, I guess, explored by people by the fact that it is this kind of idle game where you load it up and literally within the first 5 minutes, it's telling you come back in 5 minutes. We want to explore, can we add some more interactivity to it, some more kind of engaging gameplay to give people some stuff to do while the timers are running. Because right now they go to other games that and they tell us like, hey, I'm playing this other game while I'm waiting for your game, even though it has less accessibility. And we think that we can kind of add some more interesting gameplay in. So that's something that we're exploring and are pretty excited about. And will hopefully kind of encourage even more people to download the game and give it a go. So that's the immediate kind of next 6 months. Beyond that, um, we really think that like going to Android and to desktop is kind of going to broaden the number of people that can enjoy and enjoy the game. So that's something that we're keen on. Localization to other countries, we get a lot of requests through like that. So that's something that we're interested in. Um, and then at some point, we're going to have this like big decision to make. Is like, do we want to keep building out Land of Livia and to it, kind of it being a bit more of a, I guess, a meta game where there's lots of different things that you can do in it to just exist in this world and interact with it? Or do we want to start making other standalone games that have more specific concepts and mechanics around them? I don't know the answer to that yet, but I mean, the fact remains we're going to be building and we're going to be shipping. It's just a matter of where exactly we put it.
Yeah, exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. And look, I got asked in preparation for this webinar, a lot of questions around, what's coming next. We really enjoy this game, but with any kind of role-playing game, you often get to the point where you're like, okay, I really like this story. Is there a sequel coming, or is
Yep.
this ending?
Exactly.
So yeah, and I guess a lot of, from a narrative perspective, a lot of writers as well often talk about, which characters I really like this character, so I thought I could
Yep.
explore this character a little bit more and I can go in a different direction. If I was to ask you what inclusive gaming looked like for you with the learnings of Land of Livia already, what would you answer?
What do you mean by that? What is,
So if you were looking at the best possible inclusive game that you can create, is Land of Livia going to
hmm.
get there or are you going to go to another one?
Oh, I think ultimately it's another one
It's another one.
because one genre is never going to satisfy everybody. And so the reality is that, I mean, honestly, the end result that we hope for is that we find so much success with one game or a suite of games that we convince every game developer to build inclusively from the ground up, and then we can just go retire because you know, we've had this positive impact on the world. The question then becomes is like how many genres do we need to do it for before we can get to the scale where that happens?
Yeah.
And role-playing games are a big genre, but they still are pretty niche in terms of uh, people get put off by the complexity of them sometimes. Even though our game is like definitely on the simpler end,
Yeah.
there are definitely pick up and play games that are more casual and easy to get into. And so I think yeah, ultimately yeah, we I want to have a suite of games. I mean, I want it all, right? I want a suite of games, but I also want like a Land of Livia that just continues to grow and evolve in terms of the narrative depth over another decade. But it's limited resources. So yeah, not sure which way we'll go yet.
Okay, yeah, cool, cool. Well answered, I might say. Because I was curious because I've always been I've had the privilege of speaking to many, many different developers and writers, and there's always this little person in the back of their mind that goes, I really love where this is at, but what if we just flipped it and went this direction? Um, Another question I often ask a lot of these sort of creative types as well is, what games are you playing? What books are you reading? What will we find on your blurred bookshelf behind us there?
Oh, sadly, I'm not reading anything. I need to read more, but I haven't read for quite a while now. But gaming wise, I'm playing Stardew Valley at the moment. and really enjoying kind of the farming and the different kind of me shallow, almost shallow mechanics that are part of that game, but together they form something even better. I play Factorio a lot, which is an automation game, which is like really tickles the problem solving part of my brain. I recently finished Baldur's Gate 3 after honestly that was interesting in the terms of like it's this really big award-winning game. But as a dad, it's a hard game to finish. Like it's just hard to find the time, and so I had to turn the difficulty settings right down. Feel embarrassed that I had to do that, but like that's how I made it through the game. And then also Balatro, which is a poker inspired game that has been huge over the last year, and a lot to learn from that game in terms of its how easy it is to pick up and play, but also how the depth that it has. So they're kind of some of the things that I'm playing at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, cool. And look, you touched on as well that you've got a fair bit of exposure from blind role models or blind or low vision role models. Um, Molly Burke speaks very, very highly of you. Um, I guess from a business side of things, obviously you're the business owner. I don't have the more
hmm
descriptive term, but you're a business owner. What sort of business things are you learning from some of these sort of role models out in the industry that are blind or low vision?
Um, I think that I'm always trying to learn more about like ways to engage the broader community authentically, and how to, when I first started off, I was pretty unsure of like, I don't know the right way to talk about these challenges and issues. I don't know the right way to engage, and I think that I've definitely learned from people a lot about that. And certainly the Access to Success disability tech startup that I was part of in Canada, that we had a bunch of great speakers come in and there. And honestly, like one of the biggest thing that I learned is like, don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for like what you're doing, and just like don't take any criticism on board. The fact is you're doing something here that no one else is doing, and you're really committing yourself to it. And so just let everything else bounce off you, because like you're doing, why you're doing this, and it's important that you are doing it. Um, I think the other feedback of like, making sure that you're also uh, broadening your market as much as possible, so it's not just focused on people with disabilities. It's more broadly applicable. Just from a business kind of numbers survival perspective is important. So yeah, there's some of the biggest things that have kind of pricked my ears up.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So once again, we're just coming to the last 5 minutes of the webinar. For those of you that want to get your questions in, running out of opportunities, so definitely get those questions in. Just another reminder, if you are using a screen reader, you can use keystroke Alt H to open the chat window and type a question in for our guest so we can direct it his way. Aaron, we have been so privileged to have you for an hour to talk about these sorts of things because, as I said, it isn't something that is always so readily accessible regarding information, even on how to create and design games that are successful. What have we got sort of coming up in the, you already touched on the sort of stuff that you got coming up in the game side of things, but from an individual perspective, with you balancing life and balancing this as well, what are we expecting in the next 12 months? How do we follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the easiest way to communicate over voice here will just be to visit splitatomlabs.com. And we have a section there just like how to get involved, with links to a mailing list, to Discord, to our various different social media, obviously a link to download Land of Livia as well. I would say that like if anything that I've said today has resonated with you and you want to be kind of staying up to date, want to be part of the community, part of the conversation, come join us on Discord. We have a very growing community there that has the same mix as our game has between sighted and blind, low vision players. And we have really interesting conversations there about like what does inclusive gaming mean, and like what do people want to see from what we do next. And That's usually the best place to just kind of stay up to date and be part of the conversation.
So, with that in mind, Land of Livia, how do we, for those who are using Apple, what's the easiest ways for people to find it?
Yeah, jump on the App Store and search for Land of Livia, and it will come up, and you can install it. The first section of the game, the Prelude chapter, it's free. So you can download and play that for free. And then once you get to the end of that, which typically most people, it takes them about 3 weeks of gaming, then you can decide if you want to pay to unlock the full game, which I believe it's 19.99 Australian dollars at the moment to unlock the full game, which, as I said, is many months. I mean, there are some people who've been playing it since 2018, so it's certainly a lot of entertainment you can get for that time.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I've been playing it myself. Quite addictive. I'm really enjoying. Well, not once again, not intrusive addictive though. And look, don't feel bad about downing the difficulty settings on a Baldur's Gate as well for the record, because sometimes you just want to know what happens.
Exactly.
The story's that good. You just want to know what happens, and you want to know quickly. You don't want to have to. Yeah, you don't have to be over challenged, I suppose, to get to the end.
Exactly.
Um, so. With that in mind, any last questions for our guests? Now is the time to get them through. I'm going to be obviously thanking Aaron right now for once again for all of his time discussing these things, uh, being so candid as well in regards to his own sort of personal journey and identifying, what games are important to him as well. And I'm going to obviously thank him as well for employing people within the disability space as well, because disability tends to still be the largest unemployment rate that we have worldwide. So it is really important that we've got people that can talk on lived experience. And I think that's what our Telelink webinar and our Telelink community really does really well, is talking with lived experience in mind. Uh, Aaron, it's been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invite.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll end the webinar there. This has been an incredible series. We're going to obviously put all of our webinars on YouTube for people to enjoy going forward. But once again, it's been a privilege to have you, well, to be in you to be in my living room and me to be in your living room for this winter webinar series. Bye for now.